Okay, let's slideshow this. Okay. Hello. How are we? I'm Joey
I'm Michael Best.
and we are doing our presentation on trichloroethylene neurotoxicity. Oh, okay. So basically just to start, an introduction to the compound itself. So trichloroethylene, otherwise abbreviated as TCE, is a chlorinated hydrocarbon with carbon double bonds and carbon chlorine bonds, making it reactive and lipophilic. Reactive due to the chlorine bonds and lipophilic due to its nonpolar nature. Its toxicity mainly stems from its metabolism into harmful intermediates like trichloroacetic acid, which disrupts cellular processes, which we will go further into detail about. Specifically, I wanted to start by mentioning the presence of chlorine in this compound. I actually have a decent amount of background in trichlorodibenzo-P-dioxin research, which is also a compound that contains chlorine. Chlorine is very toxic to humans because it reacts with water through protein transfer in our cells to form corrosive compounds like hypochlorous acid and hypochloric acid, which will damage cell membranes, proteins, and DNA. These reactions disrupt cellular integrity and metabolic processes, leading to oxidative stress, inflammation, and it will also interfere with essential enzymes and ion channels, impairing cellular functions and causing widespread tissue damage, particularly in the respiratory system, but other effects as well. But just kind of making, specific note that chlorine is a very toxic element to be in the body. So trichloroethylene in the environment, it is a persistent bioaccumulative and highly mobile in soil and water. So specifically a compound that is persistent means that it resists degradation in the environment. So they do not break down easily, which is problematic because if it doesn't break down easily in an environment, it's not going to break down easily in your body. So once it's there, it's not going to leave pretty much. In soil, TC can leach into groundwater, which will contaminate drinking water sources, and its vaporization contributes highly to air pollution and can lead to long-term exposure risks for ecosystems and humans. Okay, so more of its environmental impacts. It's highly volatile, colorless liquid widely used in industries for degreasing metals and producing chemicals like refrigerants. Degreasing is a process of removing grease, oil, dirt, and other contaminants from surfaces, particularly metal parts. And then refrigerants are chemical compounds used in heating, ventilation, HVAC, and refrigeration systems to transfer heat. So just specifically more going into what TCE is used for. So in degreasing, um, it will kind of come into the environment, but environmental exposure during degreasing, it'll arise primarily through evaporation into the atmosphere, resulting in air pollution, or as well as improper disposal of TCE waste or spills that can lead to soil contamination. And then in refrigeration, TCE itself is not a refrigerant, but it is used in the manufacturing process of them. During the process, environmental exposure usually occurs through industrial emissions during chemical synthesis, accidental spills, and as well as improper waste disposal. Okay, so the toxicological and neurotoxic manifestation. So it exhibits significant neurotoxic effects, including CNS depression, central nervous system depression, and in severe cases, it can cause respiratory failure. Chronic exposure is linked to memory loss, difficulty concentrating, and impaired motor coordination. It can also lead to an increased risk of Parkinson's disease due to oxidative stress and mitochondrial damage, which we go kind of a lot into detail about. Um, so in numerous cases, TC exposure has been found to be correlated with the development of Parkinson's disease. Workers exposed to TC through chronic inhalation and dermal contact were found to later develop Parkinson's disease, as well as workers with indirect exposure exhibiting significant Parkinson's features or just like symptoms kind of alluding to it, including motor slowing, tremors, rigidity, and bradykinesia. And yeah, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Joey. So more on trichloroethylene and its effects on Parkinson's disease. Um, we're going to be diving into the study that was conducted at the University of Kentucky's neurobiology team, and it was led by the professor over there, by Don M. Gash. And basically, they had observed TCE, trichloroethylenes, interference with mitochondrial dysfunction and its respiration in rats, specifically in the Fisher 344 rats. So how they observed the interference was on the was by specifically targeting the complex 1 in the substantia nigra, and an acronym to that we'll be diving into further. We can just refer to SN. And it is a key brain region that is implicated in the Parkinson's disease. So by using these Fisher 344 rats, the researchers had given out the trichloroethylene orally for 6 weeks, and then had isolated the mitochondria from the SN stratum and liver. Furthermore, the oxygen consumption assays had revealed a reduced state 3 and a state 5 respiration in the SN. And all this does is confirms its mitochondrial dysfunction. Lastly, um, more analysis had revealed that a 45% loss of dopamine neurons, and these findings were able to lead to TC's mitochondrial toxicity in terms of selective neuronal degradation, and all of these are contributions to the Parkinsonian features. Okay. And then on to the next slide. As you can see, we have a figure to the right. So figure 2 from the research conducted by Dr. Gash shows the selective mitochondrial dysfunction caused by TCE exposure. Specifically, if we look at the darker bars, that indicates the TCE exposure over this last 6 weeks. And then the clear boxes are the control groups. Specifically for this presentation, we're going to be focusing on figure C, which is the bottom left. And over here, you can see how it depicts complex 1 driven state 3 and state 5 respirations, meaning that the TCE treated rats had shown to have a reduced mitochondrial activity compared to the controls. Overall, what this means is that there was a impaired oxidative phosphorylation in the treated rats. Okay. On to the doses and effects. Trichloroethylene exhibits a dose-effect relationship where its neurotoxic effects are more stronger correlated with peak blood concentrations. So by using the physiology based on the pharmacokinetic model, which is also known, the abbreviation is also known as PBPK model, researchers have shown to have blood and brain concentrations of TCE, which will differentiate based on the exposure duration and the concentration. And as we can see, this model shows that the peak of the blood trichloroethylene levels predict the neurotoxic effects better. Furthermore, right, for doses and effects, at lower doses, trichloroethylene may cause more milder neurological symptoms such as like dizziness, headaches, fatigues, while the opposite of, with higher doses, it can lead to severe neurotoxicity, including motor impairments, how we've seen in the a few slides ago with the rats, and potential links to Parkinson's disease. Lastly, chronic exposure is shown to have moderate levels, and is associated and to be seen with systematic effects, including the liver and kidney damage, as well as immune suppression and carcinogenic risks. Okay. Next, we're going to be focusing on the molecular mechanisms. So, um, before we dive into the exact mechanisms, it's important to overlook the actual structure of itself. So like how Joey mentioned about the carbon double bond and the chlorines, trichloroethylene um, interacts with biological systems through the complex molecular pathways. So the primarily it focuses on the cytochrome P450 enzymes, and these enzymes are used to then break down the molecule into reactive metabolites. These metabolites can lead and bind to cellular proteins, disrupt mitochondrial function, and even generate reactive oxygen species. All of this leads to oxidative stress and potential cellular damage. So, in order to grasp a better understanding, cytochrome P450 is the image at the bottom right below the trichloroethylene. Lastly, the molecule's lipophilic nature allows it to penetrate cell membranes, altering protein functionality, and lastly, membrane permeability, while glutathione, a conjugation, serves as a key defense mechanism in order to neutralize its toxic effects. Okay. On to the prevention and therapeutic strategies. So there was a study done, and the EPA had performed their testings on trichloroethylene on various sets of participants. And based on that study, they were able to conclude that that it poses a good amount of health risks. So some of the health risks, we're not going to go too deep into it, but some of the health risks are developmental toxicity, reproductive toxicity, kidney toxicity, and immunotoxicity, as well as cancer. Lastly, some prevention in order to, help prevent these certain health risks is firstly workplace safety. It's important to have a good understanding of how to maintain um, you know, to be sterile and to have strict safety protocols, as well as maintain and wear the correct PPE. As there can be other prevention aspects, as well as certain environmental controls, possibly even replacing TPE with any alternatives. And lastly, environmental control. And the image on the right goes to show a little bit of the health risks again, and goes a little bit more in depth in terms of how trichloroethylene in the body um, can affect and cause certain immunotoxicity, as well as certain diseases. Okay, and this brings to the end of our presentation, and we're going to end off with a little concluding statement. And the major takeaway from this PowerPoint is that trichloroethylene (TCE) is a major environmental and human health concern, because as shown in this presentation, it is constant accumulative by its bioaccumulative nature and strong molecular toxicity. And yes, from its economic usage in degreasing and chemical manufacture, it's very severe and holds severe neurological effects, um, including its possible relation to even Parkinson's disease, as we went into in depth today. TCE highlights the complex relationship between the industrial chemicals as well as the biological systems, and its ability to enter cellular membranes, produce reactive metabolites, and hinder mitochondrial function um, are all ways that it highlights the critical need for comprehensive prevention efforts, as well as strict environmental regulations and ongoing studies into its long-term health effects. As we get deeper into our knowledge of TCE's molecular foundation, we must prioritize humans and the environmental health in order to, better create alternatives, and as well as implement stronger safety measures. And lastly, it's important to commit to reducing the exposure um, of this chemical into its widespread and potential destructive toxin. And lastly, these are references. Thank you so much for your time. Um, and yeah, that's our presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Oh God, how do I stop recording? Okay.